Alright guys, this is my first ever instructional art video, and I'm doing it for students who are absent on the day I present it in class to make life easier. So what I'm presenting is the watercolor sampler project. To begin this, you need to come up with a composition with 12 shapes, because we are going to practice 12 different watercolor techniques, and you need to make sure that each shape is relatively big so you have room for each one. So this was my idea. It's basically 3 mountains with ridges and a sun with some rays that all add up to 12 shapes. And you can see I even labeled which technique I'm going to do in which shape, which you probably should do too. So from now on, I'm going to show you the painting. Okay, there's actually a certain order we have to do this because certain things need to dry before you can move on. So the very first thing we need to do is the liquid frisket. This is the liquid frisket. It basically does the same thing as the tape. It preserves the color of the paper. So the paper is white. So let's say I paint this liquid frisket and then I let it dry, and then later I paint black around it. Once it all dries and I rub off the liquid frisket, where I painted it will remain white. But you could also paint another color underneath and let it dry and then do the liquid frisket, and then that's what the color it would be when you rubbed it off. But I'm just going for the color of the paper. So because this is the sky up here, my idea for the liquid frisket was just to paint some little birds. You can do a design, you could do a pattern, whatever you want, just be thoughtful about it. And then don't touch that till it dries. You'll know it dries because I think it gets clear. If you look right now, it's like white and raised. And it kind of reminds me of rubber cement when it dries. It's kind of gummy. Okay, so I've done the liquid frisket layer. The next layer I'm going to do is called glazing. So when I did it on this one, see if you can see it. It is this one that looks like plaid here. You see how I did stripes. You're just doing the stripes in one direction. But I decided to do it for this area, so I'm actually going to do curved stripes in the shape of the sun. And because it's the sun, I want to use warm colors, but my rule is use at least 3 different colors. Because the point of this is to see how the colors interact with each other when they're layered over each other dry. Okay, so I'm going to go for yellow. Your goal when doing the stripes is to not let them touch. Leave a little bit of space between them because we want like crisp colors. Then when watercolor touches other watercolor, when it's wet, it bleeds together. So I think my 3 colors are going to be yellow, orange, and red. Whoa. Ooh, I almost touched. Alright, so I've done the liquid frisket and I've done the first layer of the glazing. The next 3 I'm going to do are actually underlayers. So 3 of the techniques, if you look at this one here, which is called splatter, see how it's green behind, that's the underlayer. And this one that's called blow has an underlayer, see the light purple on this? And then also this one called dry brush has the light orange underneath. I'm basically doing the underlayers for those 3 so that they will be dry, and then later I can add the techniques on top. So the one that's called dry brush I'm going to do right here. So my underlayer, I think I will do maybe I'll mix like a bright pink for fun, or do my best to make a bright pink. So I'm going to take the red pink is basically a light red, right? Red with white. With watercolor, to make something lighter, you usually add more water. I'm going to mix a little orange in with my red. All right. It's actually purple. Sorry, I lied. A mistake I see people doing with watercolor is doing it too thick. Remember, it's called watercolor because you use water with it and you want it kind of transparent, not like sludgy and thick like acrylic paint. Alright, this is my underlayer for the dry brush. My splatter one I'm gonna do right here, okay? And I've decided with my mountains, this side of the ridge is gonna be dark, so dark, 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 and this side will be light, 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 light. And so where the splatter is a lighter side. So if I want it lighter, could use more water. Also with these underlayers, it's probably good to use water and spread it around so that'll dry quicker. If you make it really thick with paint, it'll probably take longer to dry. So I was trying to mix gray here because it's a mountain. And this is a trick an art teacher taught me a long time ago. If you mix orange and blue, it kind of makes a cool gray. Like a more interesting gray than just doing black and white or black and water as you would with watercolor. Alright, so I did the underlayer for where the splatter is going to go. The last one is called Blow, my underlayer for Blow. So that sounds kind of funny. That is where you will later add kind of a blob of paint and blow it with a straw so it moves around. And I am doing that here, which is in one of the darker sides, so guess I'll make it dark. I can't make it too dark because I need to be able to see the paint on top where I blow. What color? Let's go purple. That's a dark color. So obviously this is pretty dark. I need to lighten it up a bit so I can see the paint on top later, so I'm just going to add water and not really add much more paint. Cool. Okay, so now I have my 3 underlayers done, and they will be drying while I do the other things. Okay, so I'm doing my first one that'll just be done all at once, which is called wet onto wet. This is a classic watercolor technique. I'm going to do it here, and this is in one of my dark zones, okay? So wet onto wet, all that means is, first of all, you paint the paper completely wet. Wet onto wet means wet paper, wet paint. So what happens if you touch wet paint to paper that's already wet is that it just bleeds. And it can be really rich. So since this is on one of my dark sides of the mountain, I want it super dark. So I'm going to really load up my brush with paint. I'm kind of digging this purpley thing. So I'm going to just dip my brush in the purple and swirl it around. I didn't show this, but before I started, I put water on all my watercolors so that they would be nice and juicy. Look at that, yeah. But I want to do more than one color. I can see I missed the water in one spot. Better add it right there. Okay, so my other color, I'll do orange. See what happens. Now let's do yellow. It can end up looking like crazy tie-dye, which is kind of what I'm going for. I just want it dark or rich, I guess we'll say. Sweet. Okay, so that is my wet onto wet example. The next one is salt. So, right here, I got some salt. The salt thing, you also work pretty wet. Basically, you paint an area that's wet and you sprinkle salt onto it, and salt absorbs water, so where the salt goes, it absorbs the paint and the water, and it leaves like a cool texture. So the area where I wanted to do salt was here. So I think I'll make it I guess red for fun. Maybe I should add a little bit of another color just for the heck of it. I'll add some orange. Okay, so I'm going to put some salt in my hand and sprinkle it. And I don't know if you'll be able to see it happening right now, but at least when it's dry, you'll probably notice that it's leaving a texture. So I also want you to think about your future with watercolor, like once you see what something looks like what could I use this for? So salt could be like, oh, you're painting snow and you want to sprinkle a little salt on this light blue color you made mixed with white, to show the texture of what granular snow looks like, or sand, or splashes from water, or whatever. Okay, so there's my salt area. The next one is sgraffito, and that's an Italian word which means scratch. So graffito, I've heard in Italian means draw, and that's why graffiti is the plural of that, just like drawings on the wall. So sgraffito, scratch. So my sgraffito area is this ridge on the mountain, so it's also going to be dark. I'm going to make it, just to make it different from the purple, I'll make it like a green-blue. Ooh. I'm going to add some green. You're going to mix together, which is cool. Okay, so I have my toothpick. You could probably scratch at different things, but I'm using a toothpick. I thought it'd be fun to scratch like little random triangles. I don't know, I might have added a little too much water. But hopefully when it dries, you'll still see something. So when you scratch, you're making like a little wound in the paper, like a little crevice. And so the paint will get more into that crevice. But if you scratched dry paint, it would probably make it lighter. So you can kind of see you're seeing my scratches more where it's not quite as puddly. So this graffito might be nice for little details, like little tree branches, stuff like that. Or any little texture you'd want to scratch in. Alright, we'll see how this dries. I can see it a little bit at least. The next technique we're going to do is a gradient. And a gradient means it's fading from one color to another. And I'm going to do that right here. So that's on my light part of the ridge. So I think I'll use red again. Maybe I'll try to do red fading to yellow. Go ahead and paint it with a brush so it's wet. I dipped in the red, but then I dipped my brush in the water again because I didn't want it too strong. So it's just faint. The purple kind of jumped in. That's okay. So now I'm going to add a little more pure red there. Ooh, it's bleeding. It's okay though, because I'm going for a gradient. You can tip your paper a little bit too, but I don't want to make the other ones go where I don't want them. Okay, so I'm going to add a little yellow over here. And manipulating the paint while it's still wet with my brush, I'm going to try to make it a fade from red to yellow. And you could use a gradient when you're shading. So there's my gradient. Next we got Saran Wrap, and I'm going to pause it real quick. Alright, I'm back. And I have my Saran Wrap. See? Okay, so this is where I'm going to do Saran Wrap. And again, this is what I determined to be the light side of the mountain, so I'll do like a lighter blue. So what happens with Saran Wrap is you want some kind of wet paint, and once you've painted the area, you just squish Saran Wrap down on it and don't remove it until it dries, which actually takes a while because there's Saran Wrap on it, which isn't letting the moisture evaporate. But then when it dries, where the Saran Wrap was kind of clinging to it, leaves all these cool faceted shapes. So I'll show you an example here. Check it out, see? That's Saran Wrap. So I painted this area. What's going to be kind of hard is just keeping the Saran Wrap in that skinny shape, so I think I'm going to cut it skinnier. Alright, skinny one. Once the Saran Wrap's on there, you can and should manipulate it, like you can move it. So if you wanted it more gathered in one area or more spread out, whatever. I've used Saran Wrap before in a painting where I was trying to show like a frozen lake. So it kind of reminds me of ice. Could look like other things too. Alright, cool, I got my Saran Wrap down. Okay, so the next area is called Tissue Lift. So I am doing that right here. A lot of times people use tissue to make clouds, which is what I'm going to do. Keep in mind, it's always good to have tissue paper or paper towel next to you when you watercolor also, in case you make a mistake, because you can immediately kind of blot it up that way. Alright, so I'm going to paint this big old block. I probably shouldn't have done purple so close to the other purple. I'll have to add another color. Alright, I got it all down. Here's my tissue paper. Kind of like the Saran Wrap, I'm going to crumple it all up because the shape of the tissue paper will create the texture of the cloud. So I want it kind of bunched up, and I'm turning it, squishing it more. Looks pretty cool. I like it. Okay, there's my tissue lift. And so this square I'm going to put alcohol on. Actually, don't really know what this stuff is. The science teacher gave it to me years ago, but it says it has alcohol in it. So alcohol and water, I think, resist each other. I'm not sure. But basically I'm going to paint this area and then drop alcohol on it, and it has what's called the fisheye effect because it makes like a little circle around the alcohol and then a little dot in the center that's darker, like a fisheye, I guess. So, I don't know. Yellow. I'll probably do yellow and another color. How about yellow and orange? And then some red. Alright, we'll see how this goes. I'm grabbing the alcohol with a straw. I always forget, it looks better on darker colors, see? So in the back it's kind of looking cooler. So you could probably use this technique if you're making like bubbles underwater or all sorts of things. That's one of my favorites. I think it looks really cool. Need one more right there. Woo. Might be cool if you're painting it like a planet also. Okay, so now we've actually done all of them, but we need to go back to the original ones and do the second layer, which was liquid frisket, glazing, splatter, dry brush, and blow. So I'm going to touch right here where I did the frisket and see, is it dry? Seems pretty dry. It actually turned kind of yellowy. So now all I got to do is just paint it, and then when the paint is dry, I can rub the liquid frisket off. Whoa, this is the first time I've done black on this. I want to do black and blue. So you can see it's already kind of resisting it. See how it's like pushing the paint off it? Alright, cool. So there's my liquid frisket one, which, like I said, it's not totally done because I haven't removed the frisket, but you still get the idea of what it does. The next one is the glazing one, so I'll see, is that dry? This is not quite dry, the yellow. So I think maybe I'll come back to that one. So splatter. This is where I was going to do splatter. My tool for that is this, a toothbrush. I recommend you make sure your toothbrush is clean because a lot of times we use those for clay in this classroom, so they could be all crusty, but you just wash it off. So I'm literally going to dip my toothbrush into some paint and use my thumb or whatever and go like this. Something you need to think about is it could go everywhere, so you might want to use like another piece of paper like this to block other areas, or even just your hand. So this creates, oops, see, I got it where I didn't want it, but that's okay. This creates a cool texture that would be found in nature, a lot like on an egg or on some animal's fur or whatever. Could be useful in a painting. Maybe I'll do one more color for fun. Whoa. So this thing's a little overloaded now. I got those big splotches. But hey, I'll show you how to mop something up. With watercolor, if something happens that you don't want, it's good to react quickly before it dries. Alright, it still looks cool. So we got splatter done. Now there's dry brush, which I'm doing here. So this might be a little boring, but because I thought I have birds here, maybe I'll do birds here. So all dry brush is basically like we did for the glazing. Like, you don't want it wet and bleeding everywhere. You want it precise. So that could be if you're doing some sort of crisp details, which I am, these little birds. Keep in mind, to me, I'm painting upside down, so it's kind of awkward. But they're not the most complicated birds, so I think I got this. Maybe they're bats, actually. Alright, there's my dry brush. Again, you could do something way more interesting than my birds, like some sort of pattern, etc. My dry brush pattern on here is kind of pretty. See all the swirls and dots? So again, you're being crisp. You're not letting your different areas touch so that they won't bleed into each other. Alright, so now we're on the one that's called blow. I better get a new straw since I put alcohol in the other one. Alright, here's my straw. It's a little mini. So, trying to remember where I was going to do that. Oh, it's right here where I made the purple kind of dark. That's okay. I think I'll do like black. That'll show up on purple. Okay, so this is another one I probably got to worry about where it's going because I'm blowing on it, but it'll probably be okay. Get low. I'm actually blowing my saran wrap off, but I think that part's dry anyway, so I'm not too worried about it. Okay, I'm going to add more. Uh-oh. No! No, it's okay. Sometimes you just gotta go with it. Like Bob Ross says, it's just a happy little mistake. It's just art, not the end of the world. Plus, this is still gonna look cool. Okay, more black. Alright, I better stop doing that, but you get the idea of the blow technique. It looks like there's just one left, which is this one, which I'm ready to go back with. So the point of this glazing is to see how two colors look layered on top of each other if they dry in between layers. I'm going to change my water real quick. Alright, I'm back. So, probably going to use the same kind of colors on the sun. So with this stripe, which I have yellow paint on my brush, you're going to see what does yellow look like when it crosses over red, when it crosses over orange, and when there's two layers on yellow. See how it looks different in different places? So now I'll switch to orange. So if you're painting like a human being or something, you might want to use this technique. Like first paint the shadows on their face, let it dry, and then add the skin tone, for example. So in the areas where the shadows were painted before, it'll be darker, but the skin tone could be even. Okay. Alright, there's my glazing one. So I've done all my techniques, and once this is dry, I'll show you how it turned out. Thanks! Hey guys, it's a day later, everything's dry. I just wanted to show you how to get the liquid frisket off, and then how to remove the tape in a good way. Even though masking tape is designed to mask, like it's supposed to go on, protect a surface, and then come off without tearing, sometimes it does tear. So my advice with that is, if you kind of pull it at an extreme angle, I think it's less likely to tear. And if it does start to tear, you should stop and start tearing and start pulling it off from the other side so it doesn't get worse. So you can see it's tearing a little bit there. The masking tape is doing its job, and under it there's nice clean white paper, except for there actually it bled a little bit. Well, that's okay too. So I don't think I'll do all the tape on camera because that could get a little boring, but you get the idea. The liquid frisket is right here, and all you do to get that off is you kind of roll your finger over it and it balls up with this weird rubber cementy stuff. And then it's also the color of the paper underneath. Hey guys, so this is my finished product for my watercolor sampler piece. I just wanted to go over at the end and re-say what each section was. So this here is the liquid frisket. This here is dropping alcohol onto wet watercolor. This is the dry brush with the birds. This is the tissue lift. This is the gradient here. This was the blow one where I blew it with the straw. This one was saran wrap. This one was Sgraffitos. Hopefully if you look close you can see where I scratched the little triangles. This was the splatter with the toothbrush. This is wet onto wet. This was adding salt. And this was glazing with layers.